Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about scope creep and if it is a necessary part of our life as developers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was a little bit of a story, but it basically went, Frederick, I would like to hear your thoughts about scope creep and whether or not it is something we should just accept as part of our job. I feel like my stakeholders are always asking me to change the scope of my story, but at the same time they seem to expect that I should still deliver on the same deadline. What should I do? And the short answer is you probably need to communicate a little bit better, my friend. Let me explain. So you know I've said a few times by now, well, it depends on how long you've been watching these little videos of mine, but if you have, you will know that I promote that soft skills are in some cases as important as coding skills. I would say that this scenario is an exception to the rule. In this scenario, soft skills are more important than coding skills. You see, the problem here is that when you're dealing with stakeholders, and if they change the scope of the story, most of the time the reason why the deadlines remains the same is because your stakeholders have no understanding of the complexity of the request they just put into you. So what I wrote back to the subscriber was, have you actually just started every single conversation when somebody wants to change the scope with, okay, sure, we can do that. It's going to take this amount of more time to do this amount of hours, this amount of days, weeks, whatever. Because if you do that, there is no person, no PO, no stakeholder, doesn't matter how untechnical they are, who won't understand that this is now something that is different from the original thing that we all agreed upon. You see, scope creep is inevitable, guys. There is no way for you to solve this problem because it comes down to, it's a two-part problem. The first part is that most of the time when you set the specification for what you're supposed to be building, your customer or your stakeholder doesn't actually know exactly what it is that they want, and it's impossible for many people to know exactly how everything should work up front. That's the first part. You simply don't know exactly what the customer wants. You can solve a lot of those problems by asking the right questions. It comes back to soft skills again. If you already know that your customer has given you a really vague specification with a bunch of gaping holes that are undefined, you need to take the time to talk to them to define these things as best as you can. But even if you're the best soft skills wielder in the world, you will not be able to go past a certain point. And that point is, depending on how senior you are and how the scope of the project is, it's going to leave you at some point. And after that, you're going to have to go through the process of discovering missing requirements or oversights or things that were undefined. And these can go down into the minutest details that you can imagine. And you simply have no way to foresee all of this stuff because you're not you can't see the future. It's impossible to know every detail. So scope creep is practically inevitable. But even though it's inevitable, that doesn't have to mean that you have to put yourself in this sort of very shitty position where you all of a sudden got a ton of more work just because someone came in and said, oh, it should work this way instead of that way, and still need to deliver at the same time, because that's pretty much mostly on you, because all you really have to do to mitigate a lot of that problem is to just, as I said, tell your stakeholder that, okay, sure, we can add this thing that you're asking for. I just want you to understand that it's going to add this amount of more time for me to build this thing. No reasonable person won't understand that if they asked for a shed and now they want a second story on that shed, it's going to take more time than building the original shed. So what I want you to take away from this is that In order for you to deal with scope creep, you first and foremost have to accept that it's inevitable. You will have scope creep. There's no way around it. First and foremost because your customer many times don't actually know exactly what they want, and the best way for you to solve that problem is to ask them the right questions. Try to define all the things that are unspecified. The more specific you can get, the bigger, the clearer the picture you're going to have of what it is that you actually need to do, and that makes estimating how long something takes much simpler. The second thing is that part of that is that you pretty much have to accept that you will progress to a point where you can't define it any further. There's a sweet spot. You can't predict every single thing, so you need to get the best picture that you can and then start working, and then accept the fact that there will be unknowns along the way because we can't see the future. Once you hit one of those unknowns, or someone comes in and wants to change the scope in some fashion, the best thing for you to do is to clearly communicate that it's okay, we can build this, but make the stakeholder aware of the complexity of this change. Because if they don't know if it's a big change or if it's a small change, if you just say, yeah, sure, we can fix it, and they don't know that that's going to add 2 weeks to the development time, or something like that, they will say, okay, cool, then there was no big deal. You need to inform them of the size of the problem that they are asking you to fix. In some cases, you say that, oh, it's going to take 1 day, and they might be fine with that. But if they came in with a request, and you say, oh, it's probably going to take a week, and then they're most likely going to go, okay, no, that's going to take too much. Let's skip that. And all of the sudden, your, at least from my perspective, problem has been solved. And all it requires is to start every conversation when scope creep comes in with, sure, we can do this. You should be aware of that it's going to take this more amount of time. Or is that okay? Have a great day.